So I wanted to welcome everybody. My name is Rabbi Mordechai Yosef ben Abraham. I'm currently in Jerusalem, and I want to start an amazing series with you. A little bit about myself. I didn't grow up Jewish. I actually converted, and it was a whole story on how I got here. But this book of Bereishit is like so important because it's not just a story that's going into a chronological order on how the world was created. It's explaining an aspect of ourselves, and I'll explain this. And this whole journey of spirituality for me has been a process of self-discovery, discovering who I really am and what I'm really about and what I'm really supposed to do in this world. It's not just a religion that I joined. And in this religion that I joined, I do this, I do this, I do that. This is not what the Torah is. It's not what Judaism is. The Torah is an expression of ourselves. And I explain like this. There's a popular midrash that says that when a child is born and he's inside of his mother's womb, that God sends an angel to teach this child the entire Torah, front and back, the whole thing. He's the child in the womb is an expert on the Torah. And this Torah becomes a part of this child, the Torah itself, as a person has experiences when they're young, and those experiences that they have when they're young, some good, some bad, they stay with that person for the rest of their life. They shape who that person is. So on a more in-depth level of that is this dynamic of the Torah that we receive. So how does it work? So the angel comes, teaches us this Torah, and the Midrash says that before the angel leaves us, it takes some type of like a stick or a wand or a baton, and it strikes us in the middle of the face, right here. And so this indentation that we have, according to the sages, that this indentation was given to us by the angel as a proof or reminder, once we learned, as we go further, that we learned this Torah before. So everything that you're learning in the Torah is something that's already inside of you. You are revealing yourself. And there's sages that teach us that the Torah itself is not just a book, right? There's levels to this information. This information is directly connected to God. It's not a book. If you put it in a bookcase, it could be surrounded by an English book and physics and all these different types of books, but the Torah is not a book. The Torah manifests itself as a physical book in this world, but the Torah is an umbilical cord from the Creator himself. It's an aspect of God that's being revealed to us. And that's what the angel comes and gives us when we're in our mother's womb. An aspect of God. An aspect of God is put inside of us. So in this series, we're going to explore the whole history of the world, what the world is, what the world isn't, from the standpoint of the sages, but we're not reading a book. We're not reading something that we're going to reference historical documents to find if it's true or parallels, because we're learning about God and God's will that was given to us, that's revealed in this external sense through this book called the Torah. So what does it mean that God taught us the Torah? What does it mean? What's going on? What does it mean God taught us the Torah? When we were children and that angel came and taught us, what we're going to start with in this whole process is we're going to start with the book of Bereishit, or the book is Bereishit or Genesis, however way you want to say it. But we're going to start from there. So this idea of the 7 days of creation, the formation of man, it's not just that this is what happened in the beginning of creation. When I wake up every day and I'm able to see, as we're going to learn, we're going to go through every single verse. We're going to go through every single verse, every single aspect of this book of Bereishit, the beginning of creation. We're going to go through everything. And we're going to realize that when I wake up in the morning and I'm able to see a sky, and I'm able to see birds, and I'm able to see clouds, and I'm able to see a moon or a sun or all these different things, I'm able to see them because of the Torah that I was taught as a child before I came into this world. When I'm looking outside and I look around, I'm looking at the Torah. This is the Torah manifest that's inside of me. I'm able to see it because God taught me this before I even came into the world. This isn't something, it's not like the Torah is confirming reality. The Torah is reality. The Torah is what I'm seeing. And so God gave us this scripture, gave us this blueprint to understand what we were already taught, to understand why we were taught it, and understand how we're functioning into this world. Because we have this concept that God also created, which is ego. Now, ego could be used for positive things, it could be used for negative things. But oftentimes, ego makes us perceive that we're living in a world that's absent of the creator, that the creator doesn't exist. It's just, it's me, I can do whatever I want, this is my life. Although I'm looking at God, I'm looking at his Torah everywhere around me. But my ego can convince me that what I'm looking at it's nature. I could go to a class in university and they could give me Darwin's theory and all these ideas of evolution and how things come together and this, whatever. And I can tell myself that this is reality, that this is how things came about. We came from monkeys and then we evolved to human beings. And this species made it with this species and this happened and the temperature changed over here and affected the water. And so we could tell ourselves that. We could tell ourselves that and deny the fact that we're looking at God's creation. Because not only when we accept that everything that we see around us is the Torah, then we have to also accept that the entity that created this reality gave us rules on how to function in this reality, right? So I'll give you this metaphor and then we'll do with a little bit of text, because this is just an introduction. But in order to understand what the Torah is teaching us, you have to understand the mechanism that's behind the Torah. Because if not, you just look at it as another book. The Torah is not the great stories, when I go home at night and I'm bored, I read some stories in the Torah and I imagine a different world, hey, it's nice. There's some good lessons in it. This isn't lessons. This is you manifest externally that you're functioning in because of knowledge that was given to you when you were a child in your mother's womb. This is what you're dealing with. And once you accept that, then you would understand that everything you see is an expression of God. And God also gave us coordinates on how to deal with that. So what is a good metaphor? Because we're going to use metaphors because, hey, if you listen to, rap music, it's all metaphors, right? So we've been trained to see metaphors. So why not use it to understand God? So for example, let's say like this. So I have friends, one of my friends, famous basketball player, Mari Stoudemire, right? Converted, learned in yeshiva, the whole thing. So he played professional basketball. So one day we were talking, I said to him like this. I said, hey, you know what, Mari, imagine this. You took the 10 best basketball players in the world, in world history. And, they had to reincarnate, whatever it is, but you have the 10 best basketball players in world history, and you put them on the court. And you give them a ball, and you say, hey, play. Now, anybody who watched sports knows that the rules that the game of basketball plays since the beginning of the creation of basketball, this is the name Naismith, the Canadian, if you believe the Canadian created basketball. So that the rules that existed during that time are different than the rules that exist today. So if you gave these guys the ball and say, hey, go and play, it'll be people doing all types of things. It'll be this guy's running over this way, this guy's doing this guy's physical, this guy's standing in the paint, this guy's over in the corner, this guy's doing all these different types of things. Because there's no centralized structure of rules. Because they're all coming from different places. They're all coming from different parts of the understanding of what the game of basketball is. And so these rules allow them to play the game of basketball together. Because basketball, like all sports, can only be truly manifest in terms of the pleasure and the joy and excitement of the game when everybody is following the same rules. That's when you're playing the game at its highest level. That's when you are tapping into this aspect of unity that comes through this collaboration of exercises that we call a basketball game. Same thing with life. If I don't have the rules of life, this reality that I see around me, that God created, that God put in me to even be able to see, that reality that I can see and I can connect to, I can't even appreciate it. I can't even connect to it. And not only that, God says, if I don't use his rules, that the experiences that I have in this world are going to be painful. It's going to be damaging. I'm not going to be able to enjoy the breeze of the cool breeze of air. I'm not going to be able to enjoy my fellow man. I'm not going to be able to appreciate the uniqueness. I'm not going to be able to appreciate the body that I was given and the health that I was given, because I'm operating in this place of ego that I know, that I decide. Decide what? You didn't create this. So that's what this first aspect of the Torah that we call Bereishit, the 7 days, the 6 days of creation and the seventh day of rest. This is what we're learning out to be able to appreciate later the system of Hashem, right? We only are able to do that when we appreciate that we are watching God's reality, not my reality, not the scientists, not the professors, not my parents, not my grandparents, not my teachers, and nobody. I am watching God's reality every day I wake up. I'm looking at his Torah. Now, I have a physical book that allows me to connect to the energy of God, that allows me to remove my ego, purify myself, that allows me to have the clarity to be able to use God's system to maximize this experience on the basketball court of life. That's what's happening right now. This is a game, life game. You've heard that before. So how do I play this game? How do I win this game? How do I become a champion in this game? This is what we're going to dive into. So there's another idea. When I was younger, I played sports. Nowhere like Amari Stoudemire. I was in high school and I played football. And when I was a freshman in high school, I decided that, hey, you know what? If I wanted to go to college, I'm like 6'2.5", almost 6'3", arguably. I realized that I wasn't going to go to the NBA. I had dreams like all kids to be a professional athlete or at least a star in college. And I fell in love with football. And I decided to go from pretty much my whole life playing basketball and start to play football when I was in school. And so my parents aren't so into it. My parents weren't so into sports, but they let me do it. My parents, were amazing people, and I'm very thankful to have them, and they should be blessed. But one of the things I learned was that although I was tall and I was strong and I was fast and I had all these amazing skills and agility that existed that I developed when I was playing basketball, on the football, it definitely gave me an advantage over a lot of people. But what I learned is that in order to maximize my physical ability, my talents, I had to learn this concept called fundamentals. And the fundamentals are like how you stand, how you move yourself, how you position yourself, how do you use your weight, how you use your arms, and all these different things allow you to maximize your physical talents on this field. And the same thing exists for basketball. Some of the guys who are some of the greatest athletes in basketball were not the guys with the most physical gifts. They were the guys who had fundamentals, who knew how their body and their functionality operated as it relates to the world around them. What to do now, what to do later, what they did before, learning from it, improving, all these types of things. And they're like almost like robots. They have this amazing muscle memory. When you see Steph Curry shooting like that, that's muscle memory. His brain is programmed. That when his elbow is at a certain arc and his fingers roll off of that ball, he knows it's going to go in the basket even before it goes in the basket. A lot of times you see him showing off and he'll shoot the ball, turn around before it even goes in. So this is this idea of muscle memory, of functionality. This is what we call the 613 mitzvot, the 613 commandments that God gave us on Mount Sinai. And those commandments are connected, obviously, to the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments is connected to the rules of the game, right? That's what the 10 commandments are, the rules of the game. The 613 allows each of those players to maximize their ultimate ability in that game. This is the mitzvot. The mitzvot says, the Torah says, here are the rules to the game of life. Thou shalt not have any other gods other than me, honoring your parents, sanctifying Shabbat, all these things, 10 commandments. But within that, there's interpersonal rules that allow us to function as individuals and as a collective community. So this is the structure that we're learning about and we're building upon by learning the Torah. Because if we're accepting that this reality is all God and everything we see was taught to us in our mother's womb, and God gave us rules on how to play this game and how to also maximize our capabilities, that's it. That's it. Game over. This is us. So I'm going to say one more thing, one more idea, and I'm going to leave it at this, but this is all about the introduction to seeing your life a new way through this adventure of Bereishit. This is the adventure we're going on. We're not just reading a book. You don't need me to read a book, but to go on an adventure, you need someone who's already went on that path. And that's what I am. I started from zero, not knowing, not having an idea, and I evolved to a person who can help other people in that path, and that's what makes me a rabbi. Not that, there's guys who know way more than I do and know this and been learning since they were 5 years old, but I've been through life, and I've been through the challenges of life. And those challenges of life have ups and downs. Moments where you feel like you want to quit, and moments where you feel like you're the king of the world. And you realize that both of those moments are illusions. Is a question, is it?
How does Bereishit interact with your way of life?
Yeah, so the question is, how does the book of Bereishit interact with this idea of understanding life? Because Bereishit, with my life. So Bereishit specifically is going through the different stages of creation, right? The different stages of creation, how the stars were created, how day and night were created, how the trees were created, how the waters were created, how the animals were created, how the sea creatures were created. And so as I remind myself, and even actually learn it in a new way, that deepens my personal connection to God. That I can remind myself when I go outside that, wow, this is a byproduct, what I'm saying is a byproduct of the Torah that I learned when I was in my mother's womb. And now I'm able to refine that and see it even on a deeper level, because there's dimensions, there's 10 dimensions of everything. And within every 10, within every level of each dimension, there's 10, and it goes on and on and on and on. That's a whole nother point. Yeah, go ahead.
What is you work with students? What you say?
Yeah, so the dynamic is, the question is how can a student also go on that adventure? So every time we open the Torah, the sages, our chachamim, tell us that we have to say a blessing. And what that blessing does is that it opens up the gates of God's light to enter us as we learn God's Torah. And not only does that light allow us to understand the Torah that's physically in front of us, it allows us to see the Torah that's around us, the instructions, the path of everything that we see around us, right? So as we learn, we're not just learning a manuscript, we're infusing our souls with a holy light that comes from the heavens. And that holy light that we're learning through this Torah study will elevate our consciousness, will allow us to do, it's like the difference between, like say a guy who's been walking in the desert and he hasn't eaten, he hasn't, had anything to drink for a couple of days, and he's struggling. And then you run into him, and when you run into him, you have the most amazing knowledge about life that you just discovered the day before that. And you see this person and you want to tell them, like, hey, look what I just learned, look what I just found out. And then you realize that he's not in a place to hear what you're saying because he's thirsty. It's because he's hungry. So what you have to do is you have to feed that person first. You have to give them water. You have to give them bread. And as they're satiated, then they're going to be able to hear what you're saying to them, right? That's why Abraham used to always bring people into his tent and feed them and then teach them about God. So in that same way, when we learn the Torah, we're filling our souls with light that removes the emptiness that we have in this world, because the world we all created with a deficit. When we wake up every morning, we got to eat. When a baby's born, the first thing he wants to do is nurse from his mother. We're born with a lack, right? The lack is, the whole world revolves on the lack. Everything, all ambitions have to do with the lack. So on this journey of learning, as we fill our soul with light, we will elevate our consciousness. And through elevating our consciousness, we'll be able to recognize the gifts that are around us. So the person who's learning this with me is not just reading manuscripts. We're filling our souls with light. And that light that we're filling our souls with is going to allow us to see the world in a different way. And we're going to realize what true happiness is after learning this. And I'll give you a hint. True happiness is knowing that you're at the right place, at the right time, dealing with exactly what you're supposed to be dealing with in this lifetime. And we're going to go into it. There's so many ideas. We could go on and on and on, but I would try to do an introduction. But I want to just bring one point from the passage. I'm going to read the first verse that God tells us. Now, why is that first verse important? It's the first verse. But more than that, that I'm going to utilize a few ideas in this first verse to give you an insight to the depth and the complexity of the words themselves, specifically as it relates in Hebrew. And it's important to know that, because when people open the Torah and they read the Torah, they read it and they read it in English or whatever the language is, whatever, and maybe even in Hebrew, and they just see it as a matter of fact thing. But the text itself, the words, the letters, these letters we're going to go into it, but it's amazing. So let's just start the first verse, right? So the first three words is Bereishit bara Elohim, right? So you can read it and say, in the beginning, God created, right? Beginning, Bereishit, God Elohim bara, created, right? Or, and I'm not going to go there. I know people are going to get freaked out when I do this, but I have to do it to just give kavod to Hashem and the greatness of our sages and how big this is. But the sages teach us, more the mystical sages teach us, that you can read this verse and say, in the beginning, God created Elohim. So what is Elohim? Oh, it's God. No, Elohim is an attribute of the Creator. It's an attribute of God. God is beyond our imagination, beyond our logic. We'll never know the totality of Creator. We were not designed, our intellect, our sages teach, our intellect was never designed to take in the totality of the Creator. So what we have are attributes. So Elohim is an attribute of the Creator. And there's a whole story, the Holy Zohar, our commentaries talk about how this word Elohim even came into existence, and how there's upper heavens and lower heavens and the whole thing. And in that concept, out of that, we could talk about it and we could debate. Because there's a lot of ways to understand the depth of the Torah. The sages teach us there's 70 faces to understand the Torah, 70 levels to understand the Torah. So we can start on a basic level. And within that basic level, there's 70 ways to understand that basic level. And then there's a higher level of they use the word pardes. There's an idea of pashat, which is a literal interpretation. There's the idea of remes, which is the R, pardes. the rimus. And what is a rimus? The rimus is hints. There's different insights that you could pick up, maybe even moral lessons. And then you have this idea of drash, which is a whole system that our sages have connected to Rabbi Ishmael and the 13 principles that you have inside of your Siddur. And that system allows us to understand, to darshan, to abstract words, letters, the placements of words, the repetition. And then from there, our sages were able to derive meanings of deeper interpretation of what God is saying, certain halakha, the rules that we were given. That comes from there. And we have this deep level called sod, which is the concealed of the holies of the secrets. So these are the 4 levels that we utilize as Jews to analyze the text. And so that's where the Midrashim and the Talmud, the Gemara, the Mishnah, the commentaries from all of our sages, it's one big world that comes together. So just to read it on a literal level, Rabbi Shimon says, if a person just learns the Torah on a literal level and they never go further, it's better that they never lived at all. Because when you're looking around and you're seeing this reality around you, when you see the stars and you see the moon and you see the trees and you see the plants and you see all these things and you just look at it on a literal level and you never understand or dive into it, why did Hashem create it that way? Why is it designed that way? Why is it structured this way? And you never ask those questions. You're not even living. So let's go a little bit further. So there's a famous rabbi, Hasidic rabbi. I learned all the different types. I'm in everywhere. There's a Hasidic rabbi, the Hasidim movement, it's a whole big conversation. We'll get into all these things much later. But right now, we're going to go into creation and changing the way we see reality. There's a Hasidic master by the name of the Maggid Dov Ber. Whole big story around who he is. It's just an introduction, but he says an amazing point. And a lot of people agree with this. This is everywhere. This is in all of our sages. That the physical world that we live in right now, like everything, like right now I'm a human being, right? I'm a human. So my mom and my dad have 2 different backgrounds, right? And they have genetics, right? So when 2 people come together, a man and a woman come together, I don't know if I can say that, but when a man and woman come together and they share their DNA code, their DNA together is shared in 2 codes, right? It's their DNA codes, their genetic code. And that genetic code from my mom and my dad go all the way back to my grandparents, great-grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, all the way to Adam and Eve, the first man and woman. Believe it or not, we're all connected through Adam and Eve. So that dynamic of this genetic code that makes me who I am is a mashal, is a metaphor for something even deeper. The sages say that everything in the physical world is built off of Hebrew letters. Everything. Everything is built off of Hebrew letters. The Hebrew shapes are not just words that we use to understand. Like we have English, Latin, Arabic. No, these shapes are actually the DNA structure on how everything physical exists. I know this is for some people, like I heard this before. Some people say, this is wild, right? So the shapes that form letters inside of the Torah that become words and sentences are actually expressions of the DNA code of the physical reality. So this is what the Maggid Dover says. He says, the Torah says, it's different ways to understand it, but the Maggid Dover says like this, and I just want to show you the depth. Just one sentence. When I was in yeshiva, I had a friend of mine, Shuli Karsh. He's a rabbi now, amazing, has a bunch of kids, but we used to be chavrusa. He used to help me with my dikduk, all different types of things. And literally we spent almost a month bringing different commentaries on just the first few verses of this book, because there's infinite amount, and it was so much more. But the Maggid Dover says like this: when the Torah says Bereishit bara Elohim, in the word et, which is an aleph and a taf, which is the beginning and the end of the Hebrew alphabet, he says that is explaining to us that in the beginning, God created the Hebrew alphabet, the letters, and those letters became the building block of creation. That's what he says the et is there for. There's different discussions on why the et there. Rabbi Hirsch says something amazing about the et, and so different discussions on it. But this is what he says. And so it says after the et, which the Maggid Dover says in blessed memory, that this is the creation of the world. Then it says Hashemayim ve'et haaretz. God created the heavens and the earth. The physical reality, which is earth, and the non-physical reality, which is the heavens. Some people could connect that, and I could go into, because I have a book, Mind of the Black Jew, and this is the whole paradigm of understanding the physical and non-physical reality and how they interact. But that's not for this time. So I'll leave you here on this point. So the Torah has so much depth. The verses have so much depth. There's so much going on. It's so beautiful. And you know what you're learning to understand? Yourself as it relates to God's will. So I wish everybody to join us on this amazing journey. And from this amazing journey, we should all realize who we are and understand who the Creator is in a new way. Please join us. We're going to go through everything, and we're going to become new and greater people. Shabbat Shalom.